Hello, everyone. A very good morning once again, or a very good afternoon. First of all, thank you so very much for joining us in the third day of our 3-day webinar series. This is the last day, and I must really say that you have been really supportive towards this endeavor of ours. I mean, you have given us tremendous response in terms of registration, in terms of showing up for the webinar, and the loads of questions that we had. We are so thankful to you. All right. Now, let me just give you a quick recap of the things that we've seen in day one and day two. So day one was all about best practices around the Active Directory management. So how do you maintain a uniform process for managing objects in Active Directory, and how do you automate things like Active Directory cleanup, creating user accounts. So you want 5 user accounts created next week in your AD Office 365 Exchange. So how do you automate the process in a controlled manner? And also, how do you perform a non-intrusive delegation? Example, you want your helpdesk technicians to reset password and unlock account without giving them that right in Active Directory by means of security groups. Why don't you just give them access to an application and they perform the action only through the application? So that's what I call as a non-intrusive delegation model. Now, day two, we discussed about something really interesting, which was around Active Directory auditing. We just spoke about Windows auditing, all right? Especially we focused on one log in your Windows infrastructure, which is the security log in the event viewer. And the security log contained some really important event IDs that could mean a lot to any administrator that uses Active Directory. So we saw 7 or 8 cases or 8 event IDs that you might want to track in your Windows infrastructure. So if you have a Windows server, 100% the server has a security log. Now the security log has crucial events. So what do you track with that? Now day 3, today, we are going to be talking about SIEM. I'm not here to just scare you with stats. I'm not saying that we had so many attacks in 2018, 17. So we also have increasing number of attacks in 2019. No, I'm not here to scare you with stats because all of the statistics is available for all of you, and you know that. All I'm here today to do is I'm here to just talk about some logical approaches towards SIEM. I understand that you already have a SIEM solution in place, or you're trying to replace an existing SIEM solution, or you do not have a SIEM solution, so you'd like to purchase one. Irrespective of the case, what could be the possible logical approach towards SIEM so that we actually trim down our security incidents and harden our security overall, okay? Instead of just relying on the stats, why don't we just take logical approaches? That's the whole point here. Now, even before I introduce myself and reveal the agenda to you, I'd like to perform an AV check. So please spend 2 seconds of your time in order to let us know whether the audio and the video is clear. So if you could just message us saying yes or fine, I'd be able to understand that everything is fine, and I'll proceed forward. All right. So I'll wait for your text message. I'm sorry, your messages here. Okay. So, all right. So we have a lot of yeses. So if I get a couple of more yeses, I'd be happy to start. All right. We'll just wait for another 10 or 15 yeses. Got it. Got it. Got it. All right. So it looks like everything is fine. The audio video is good. Now, my name. So if you had joined my session on day 1 and day 2, you would know me. But for those of you who are new to this session, my name is Vivin Satyan, and I've been working as a technical consultant in the Active Directory team of ManageEngine. And I have 7.5 years of experience as a technical consultant. So I talk about Active Directory, and I also talk about general IT security. All right, IT security, I know it's a broader term, but I stick to Active Directory and the platforms revolving around Active Directory. So let's say SIEM, Office 365 auditing, and all this stuff. Okay, that's what I do, and that's what qualifies me to be presenting today. If you're wondering, hey, what are your qualifications? These are my qualifications. Now, the agenda for today's session is going to be really simple. I'm just trying to keep this as simple as possible. I'll just start off with the basic introduction to logs. Now, what are logs and why are logs important? And followed up by an important topic. There's something called log management cycle. No matter what application you use in your organization, every application has this log management cycle, or I would say it better have this log management cycle, because this is the basic principle for SIEM. All right. Now, third, the difference between a good installation of SIEM and a bad installation. I'm saying this bad because it's really bad, right? So the difference between a good and a bad installation of SIEM is the number of indicators of compromise that the installation carries. All right. So if your installation, if your SIM solution has, let's say, only the built-in indicators of compromise, chances are you might have to work a little bit harder to add more, right? So if you have the habit of adding more indicators of compromise, that's when you really make the difference between a good and a bad SIM solution. Now, a word of caution here. I'm not referring to the cost of the solution. You can have a $500 solution, or you can have a $100,000 solution. It doesn't matter. So as long as you don't key in your indicators of compromise, because no one understands, or no vendor out there in the market understands your infrastructure better than you. So you will have to key in proper indicators of compromise to that tool that you have installed in order to make a difference. So I'm going to quickly introduce you to Log360 RSIEM solution, and then close off the session with common information security mistakes that I have seen in organizations, and also that I've managed to study over these past 7.5 years of being in the field. And if you are trying to replace an existing vendor, or you're trying to looking for a new vendor, I have a checklist for you. When you have everything in this checklist ticked off, that's when you know that the vendor is reliable. All right. So these are the things that we're going to discuss today. So please stay with me for the next 40 minutes. All right, logs. Basic definition, ABC of logs. Logs are nothing but documentation of events. Now, everything in your infrastructure, be it a software application, be it a user, be it a modification done to a group, or a patch, whatever, has some sort of logging. All right, maybe a firewall rule changes, someone actually inserts a table to your SQL database. Everything is recorded somewhere in the form of log files. And that's when we have a process called log management. When you have volume of data, you'll have to have a process to manage it. So that's when we'll have to talk about log management. Now, why is log management important? Number one reason, to know who, what, when, and where. That is what I mean by important for security intelligence. Number two, nowadays, let's say in the last 4 or 5 years, okay, to be precise, you have a lot of compliance, especially for information security. Okay, now they want to make sure, these compliance regulations want to make sure that information is stored securely. Now that we're talking about GDPR, and in Asia we have stuff like ISO, and then you have NDA. All that implies, or all that focuses on one thing: information security. All right. Now, if you're wondering, why should I be worried about compliance and in the same term talk about log management, right? If that's your question, let me give you a small example here to better relate log management and compliance together. Now, this is a log, all right? This is not an entire log, but I've managed to sniff out a line from the transaction log. Okay, so let's say you go to a restaurant, and then you have a nice dinner with your family, and then you swipe your credit card in the POS, the point of sale device, and that also gets recorded somewhere. It has a log entry. Okay, let's say this is one such log entry. Now, this log entry has some very crucial personal information. If you just take a closer look at the transaction log here, you have two factors that pertain to PII, personally identifiable information. So you have the customer ID right here, and you also have the credit card number. Now, if this log falls in the wrong hands, you know what is the end result. Okay, so I'm not stressing on the importance of log management and why are the compliance regulations after these log management principles. All right, it's because we need to safeguard PII, personally identifiable information, be it GDPR, SOX, HIPAA, PCI, FISMA, or any regulation in any part of the world. All of them have 4 steps in common. All right, now these are the 4 steps. They want you to have, or they want you to collect as many logs as possible. That's what I mean by adequate logging. And they want you to centrally store all those logs. Okay. Of course, there are cases in which the logs need to be distributed. I agree. But I would say in most of the cases, they prefer logs to be stored centrally. In that way, it can be secured a lot more easier than it being distributed in your entire infrastructure. Right. Now, after you collect logs and store them centrally, there has to be a process by which you review log data, right? Now, for example, PCI DSS has a clause in its regulations saying that you need to review log data daily for its integrity, right? You need to know whether someone has touched it today. You need to know whether someone has touched it yesterday. So reviewing log data, depending on the regulation that you fall under, so you'll have to review them daily or weekly or once in every month, so on and so forth, right? Now, again, retaining logs. You'll have to store logs forever. You heard me right, forever, right? So you cannot scrap logs after 6 months. You cannot scrap logs after 1 year. Let me tell you why. Depending on the vertical that you fall, if you're in the banking sector or if you are in a healthcare sector, which has sensitive user information, you better be saving logs forever. And I'm 100% sure you already know that. I'm not here to lecture about that, but you know that you'll have to retain logs forever because, let me give you a quick example. All of us know about the Marriott hotel incident, right? And all of us know about, I'm not picking names here, so let's say if an organization is breached and it's a staged breach, let's say an attack happens in 2013 and another attack happens in 2016, so chances are you might have to review logs uh, that goes back to 5 or 10 years depending on the timeline of the breach. Okay, so it's very important that we retain logs and then monitor security of the logs. No matter what regulation, these are the common steps. Okay, now that's when there is something called as a log management cycle in place. Now, most of the tools out there by the vendors have this process in place. I just want you to just revise this process once. You should be able to collect logs, and the collected logs should be processed. Okay, in 99.99% of the time, the processing should be real time. Okay, and only when the process is real time, you'd be able to get real time alerts. There's no point in getting to know about a security incident after, let's say, 90 minutes or after, let's say, a day or two. Okay, so the processing has to be real time and the alerting has to be real time too. Now, in order to better study the alert that has been raised, okay, you'll have to have reports that give you not just information but insights. There's a big difference between information and insights, and I'm going to give you an example to define that. After you get a detailed report, all the logs that you have collected in step one need to be stored. I just spoke about retaining logs. Okay, so it needs to be stored in a very secure manner. There's a process by which, or using which, you need to be storing logs. Okay, we'll be discussing about that too. And the stored logs, so let's say you store up gigabytes of data, you should have an efficient or a search engine that could actually go through logs, the present day logs or logs that date back to, let's say, 2012 or 2010, and then it should be able to give you the information that you're looking for, let's say for forensic analysis. So all these 6 stages together is what is called the log management cycle. Now, if you have the log management cycle in place, let's say you have the state-of-the-art application installed and you have the best log management practices in place, are you safe from cyber attacks or let's say any kind of minor attacks? No, I'm not saying that you are safe. All I'm saying is we can minimize the impact of new attacks. That's the logical approach towards SIEM, I would say. So how do you minimize the impact of new attacks? If you are wondering how to start this process, I already have a tool in place, Vivin, but can you actually get me to start the actual process, or let me logically move towards securing my infrastructure? If that's your question, and you have, assuming that you already have a SIM solution in place, I would say step one in logically moving towards SIM is prioritizing your log sources. Now, infrastructures, so you might have all kinds of logs, all right? So you might have firewalls logs from your databases, applications, intrusion prevention systems, detection systems, you name it, you have a log for that. Just because you have logs from all sources, it doesn't mean you'll have to give all of them high priority. No. Now, depending on the vertical that you fall under, so you'll have to prioritize your log sources. Now, if it's a Windows predominant infrastructure, then I would focus on the audit logs from Windows infrastructure and the user activity logs, right? Now, if I'm more concerned about the uptime, let's say I manage devices or I manage applications for my vendors, then I'll have to be worried about my system performance logs and connection logs. And there are certain logs that are common for all, okay? The intrusion prevention and the intrusion detection logs, right? And you have few other sets of log sources. I'm not diving into the details, but you know what is important for you. So you'll have to prioritize the log sources. That's step number one. The second and the most important step to logically move towards SIM is defining indicators of compromise. Remember, I told you the difference between a good and a bad installation of SIM is the indicators of compromise that you key in to that software, right? It's not the built-in rules or the built-in reports or the built-in alerts. It's the rules that you feed in that matter. Now, why should you manually feed in the rules? Is it important? Yes, because the SIM solutions come out with predefined rules, and they just focus on some common criteria, but only you know what is the problem factor for your infrastructure. Only you know what are the possible indicators of compromise for your infrastructure. Okay, that's when you'll have to define proper indicators of compromise. Now, wait a minute. What are indicators of compromise, and how is it going to make any difference? Okay, if that's your question, I have a small example. Okay, I call this the log data transformation process. So how do you transform raw data, and how do you so that to information and information to insight, so that insight lets you take corrective action? I'm pretty sure that this is familiar to some of you because this is a snapshot from Fitbit. I used to use Fitbit, okay, past tense, because that actually kind of scares me to death. It gives me my heart rate, my calories burned, and it sometimes calls me lazy. So I was not very much impressed with Fitbit, so I just canceled my subscription, okay? And I now have a normal watch that just shows me time. I'm good with that, okay? Now, well, I'm just taking this example here. Now, if you see this, my Fitbit initially told me that I've walked 7,000 odd steps today. That's just raw log information, okay? Now, Fitbit also gave me a mobile app. Now, think of this like your SIM solution that you have. Now, when you log into the solution, or when you log into the mobile app in this case, you get reports, you get bar charts, you get all sorts of information that you want. So that's when the first step of transformation happens, data to information. Just by logging into an app, you have reports. Now, this is your default SIM solution. Now, how do you transform information to insight is by adding indicators of compromise. You will have to manually add it. The difference between a good SIM solution, the one that you see here on the right, the difference between a bad or a not so good solution, or an average solution, right, is the indicators of compromise. Now, if you take a look at this example here, when I have a pink dotted line to my mobile app, I get a clear idea of the activity. Now, this tells me, all right, today I have walked 7,442 steps, all right, which means I'll have to walk another 2,000 odd steps to reach my weekly target, which is 10,000 steps right here, or 10,000, yeah, it's 10,000 steps. You see this 10K? I'll have to walk another 2,000 steps. So when I add an indicator, I am able to take actions that actually mean something. This is exactly what I refer to as logical approach towards SIM. So when you do not have an indicator, you just have reports and alerts. But when you have an indicator, you have insights on what's going on. That's why you have tools out there in the market, but I'm not here to discuss about the tools. I'm not just going to be talking about tools here. I'm here to give you some common indicators of compromise. And you can think of n number of indicators of compromise because we are talking about security in the year 2019, and you have those many number of indicators of compromise that you cannot even count. So I'm just going to be really basic here, but at the same time, basics means little things. Little things matter. You cannot overlook little things. Okay. So I'm just going to talk about an attack kill chain here that has 4 stages. So first stage is about credential compromise. Second stage, after I compromise a credential, I actually elevate my privilege. Third stage, I actually move across your network. So after I elevate my privilege, I'd like to hop around your network. Fourth stage, after I have moved across your network happily, I'm now going to exit your organization with all the information that I want. After causing all the damage that I want. I'm sorry. So now we're just going to be talking about defining IOCs, indicators of compromise, for all these 4 stages: stage 1, 2, 3, and 4. Let's get started with stage 1, credential compromise, and I'm going to give away the indicator of compromise for a credential misuse or a credential attack here. Let's say as IT administrators, is brute force attack, because brute force has been in the market for quite some time. It's not a new thing, right? It's been in the market for at least 10 years now. So, or more than 10 years, okay? So I'm here to talk about brute force because if you're thinking about brute force as a thing of the past, no, brute force has evolved. For example, let me give you a small example here. This is a snapshot from a tool called Hydra, and you see that this is a snapshot of a brute force on a Gmail account, right? Now, brute force has a specific pattern. If you could notice the pattern, irrespective the brute force is on a Windows account or let's say a Gmail account, the pattern is the same. The count might vary, but the pattern is the same, right? That's my point. So if you just take a closer look at this, the account is Benny, and it's a Gmail account. So you have failures, 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 and then a sudden success. So if you have successful failures and a sudden success, chances are the pattern matches brute force attack, right? Now, let's pause it there. I'll get back to brute force in a while. But before that, I'd like to share a quick tip with you, something for you to think about when you are having a cup of coffee with your administrator in the pantry, all right? Now, when you're on a coffee break, when you have a discussion with your colleagues, let's say the other IT admin in your organization, I just want you to have a word about the topic that I'm going to be discussing now, all right? Now, I'm here to be discussing about a very important topic that most of the administrators tend to overlook, and that is your password security. Now, there are 2 aspects for passwords. One is the front end and the back end. The front end is all about how long the password is, have you enabled MFA, and is your password complex, and all that stuff, right? Now, the back end of your password security is, how is your password stored, right? We all know that Facebook was sued, let's say, a few months ago. I don't remember the exact date, but a few months ago, for storing passwords, millions of passwords in the database as plain text, right? They did not hash, they did not salt, or they did not pepper, they did not encrypt the password. It was just stored as plain text, right? Now, this is the area that I'm about to be talking here. Now, you store passwords in your organization. I'm not saying that you store them as plain text. If you store them as plain text, I wish you the best of luck, right? Now, let's say you are a good administrator. I'm assuming that, okay, I believe that you are a good administrator. I'm not assuming, all right? Now, I just want you to think about this. How are your passwords stored? And now, if it is encrypted, yes, we can very well decrypt the password, but encryption and hashing are something different. Encryption is reversible, hashing is not, right? The only way by which you can match the crack the hash of a password is you need to be generating your own hashes, and then you'll have to match the hashes. That's when you know what the password is. Let me give you a live example here, okay? All right, you see this? So these are not passwords, but these are hashes. If you note, the algorithm that I've used or the application uses in my infrastructure, not my infrastructure, don't get me wrong, mine is kind of secure. This is a test infrastructure, let's say. Okay, I use SHA-1 here to hash my passwords and use the hashes, right? If this is the hash, let me show you how easy it is to break these hashes or crack these hashes. Okay, I copy. I don't even use an exe because exe to play the game the amateur way, you don't need an exe. Only when you're thinking about something professional, you need exes. When it's amateur, something like what I do here, all you need is just to open up a web portal, and then you just paste the hashes. Okay, confirm that you're not a robot. Interesting. Security. Okay, and then you hit crack hashes. So in less than few seconds, I've cracked the hashes. So these are the hashes, and the hashing that I told you I've used is SHA-1. You could clearly see this. And the result of my experiment is I now have the passwords, right? Now, I told you that there are two aspects to password security. One, the front end, which is the complexity of the password. Two is the back end, how do you store your password, or what algorithms are you using? Now, you need to ensure that your solutions have better password hashing capabilities. Now, if you use an application in your infrastructure, you'll have to ensure that the application stores passwords, if at all, if it does, stores password using a strong algorithm. Okay, you see this? The point that I'm trying to highlight here: longer the hash value, greater the time and complexity to crack the password, right? So that's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. And I also add to that, your configuration matters too. Okay, it needs to be long enough. MFA and all that stuff is equally important. I'm not saying no. Okay, now I'm just going to be talking about two password attacks. This was just a tip for you, but I'm here to talk about two password attacks or indicators of compromise for common password attacks. One is brute force. So let's have a look at brute force here. So I go to event log analyzer. I go to correlation. All right. So by the way, this is the demo version. If you'd like to access the application, you just go to demo.eventloganalyzer.com. Don't get confused. I'm here to be. I will be talking about a consolidated application real soon, in a few minutes. So please bear with me. Okay. I'm just here to show a typical brute force pattern here. Okay. So I go to correlation, then I go to user account threats, brute force. So now correlation means you are taking multiple events and you are connecting the dots. So if you do that, you get an event timeline that actually tells you an account has failed to log on, failure, and then a sudden success. This is a pattern for brute force. If you'd like to know more details, you have details here, and you get all the details that you want, right? Now, what I'm trying to say is, if you are trying to brute force an infrastructure, if as an attacker, chances are the organization already has a SIEM solution in place that is watching out for brute force. I just showed you one solution which actually watches out for brute force, right? So I'm not going to be using brute force as an attack pattern. Unless and until I have tools like Hydra, then I would. If not, I'm not going to be touching brute force. I'm going to be using another easy method, which I showed you yesterday, but I believe it's worth repeating, which is password spraying, right? Now, this password spraying, especially for Windows accounts, works 99% of the time because administrators kind of overlook this indicator of compromise. What is the indicator of compromise for password spraying? I'm here to give you that. So for password spraying, the indicator of compromise that you would have to set is, when we talk about Windows accounts, so you'll have to watch out for security logs in your domain controllers, right? And you'll have to watch out for event ID 4625 related to logon that happens in less than 1 hour on all your sensitive accounts in your organization. I'm not saying do this for all the domain user accounts. No, you don't want to be getting 50 emails in 1 hour. No, my point is not that. All I'm saying is pick your domain admins, administrators, schema admins, enterprise admins, and watch out for event ID 4625. From where? From the security logs of the event viewer. And if the time frame is less than 60 minutes, or if you feel like you need to be going down to 10 minutes or 5 minutes or even 1 minute, yes, define it. Then it could mean possible user password spraying. So user password spraying is I don't try multiple passwords on one account. That's brute force, right? Password spraying is I take only one password and I try it not on one account, but all the accounts that I manage together, right? If I'm a bit sensible, I would not be touching your domain user accounts, but I would be first going after your, high privileged accounts if I have the right tools, all right? So that's user password spraying. And you will have to manually key in that indicator of compromise to your tool. Tell your tool to watch out for such IOCs. All right. Now, with a tool like AD Audit, right, we have a password spraying rule right here. So if you just search for password, all right. So if you just scroll, oh, let's do spraying here. Okay, let's search for spraying, S-P-R-A. So user password spraying. You see this? So if you have such events getting recorded in your infrastructure, I don't have any information here because there was no such case here. So if you really have such cases, you can actually go back to any time period that you want and then see whether you have such patterns, all right? Whether your sensitive accounts were recording this event 4625 in less than 16 minutes, right? This is password spraying. So brute force, yes, we've already seen that. We already know how to capture it. Most of your tools have this built in. Now, this is one IOC that you would not, indicator of compromise, that you would not have built in, user password spraying, right? So watch out for this. Stage 2, elevate the privilege. Now, you can only do so much with your domain user, but you can do everything you want with a domain admin, isn't it? So I'm going to elevate my privilege from a domain user to a domain admin in your infrastructure. Right? So how do I do that? I add myself to the appropriate groups: administrators, domain admins, enterprise schema admins. Now, how would you set an indicator of compromise for all these and other groups that you have in your infrastructure? Watch out for these event IDs, right? Any user getting added or any user getting removed from your top level groups should be brought to your notice, okay? I'm not saying it's always a case of inappropriate privilege escalation. No, I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is whether it's appropriate or not, that needs to be brought to your notice. You need to get an SMS notification, all right? So I even covered this yesterday, but let's repeat it. So if you have a group, let's call this the application admin group that has access to 5 different applications. So any user I add to the group gets automatically gets access to 10 applications. So application admin group, members, let's add a user. So I add a user, Jesse. Check names. I see Jesse Arthur. Okay. Apply and okay. So you see add and remove. You need to set real-time SMS notifications for these two. So anytime when someone adds a user to domain admins or exchange admins or schema admins, wherever you are, you get an SMS notification, right? So let me quickly do this here. I've added a user to the application admin group and the name of the user is Jesse and my name is Vivin. All right, I've logged in as Vivin just to show you. I've logged in as Vivin. All right, so let me quickly see whether my application has captured the change. So I go to my Windows event log. Just see this, the recent alert section. It tells me Jesse Arthur was added to the application admin IT day group by Vivin-1438. I just did the action, okay? And I've already got an SMS notification of the action. So this is something related to privilege escalation. What do you do after you have the right privileges and you've compromised one host? Try and compromise as many hosts as you want, right? Laterally move across the network. Now, you can think of at least a minimum of 10 cases of lateral movement, right? A minimum of 10. And I'm here to share some of them with you. The problem with lateral movement is it doesn't happen, let's say, immediately, or it doesn't, the time frame of lateral movement is not just one day. When I decide to laterally move across a network, and if you don't have the right indicators of compromise set for stage 1 and stage 2, I happily sit in your infrastructure for at least 5 months, right? Now, don't think I'm exaggerating here. I have proof from Microsoft. So this is an image, excuse me for the quality of the image, but the point is, if I compromise a Windows credential here, after compromising a first host, within 48 hours, I'm able to elevate myself to domain admin, all right? So we've already seen how do you set indicators of compromise for users, brute force, and let's say user password spraying. You can also set IOCs for other password attacks. If you don't capture it in stage 1, we've seen how to capture it in stage 2, right? Domain admin compromise. So let's say this attacker is trying to add him or her to domain admin. I already get an SMS notification and I see that this user shouldn't be a part of domain admin. I kill the chain here, okay? If I do not have set IOCs for stage 1 and stage 2, now happily ever after, as they say it, the attacker stays inside your infrastructure for 150 days, okay? And that's 5 months approximately. And with 5 months and a domain admin credential in hand, you know the rest of the story, right? So how do you reduce this 150 days to real time is what I'm talking about so far, setting indicators of compromise. Now, what are some indicators of IOCs? Okay, indicators of compromise is a large term. I repeat that very often. So let's keep it IOCs. So what are the IOCs that you can set in your logs? The logs that are getting generated every day in your infrastructure. The first IOC, watch out for new service installations, whether it be Windows or non-Windows, okay? But in this case, I've just taken Windows. You can also look out for non-Windows. Whenever you see a new service popping up, first point, why is a service installation important? When you install an application, there's a service associated that gets installed in most of the cases, right? Is it a big deal? Now, that's not a big deal. What I'm saying is, what if I actually write a piece of code that does not create a user object that actually installs a service in your infrastructure, then I use that service to trigger a malicious process, and I do what I want in your infrastructure. That's my concern, right? Now, whenever you see new services popping up on your workstation, or even worse, on your servers, you record 4697 in the logs, okay? So when you record 4697, it's worth investigating, okay? Now, the log that I want you to focus on is the security log, and the event ID that I want you to focus on is 4697. And when you have such things happening, you should be having a capturing mechanism for that, right? So you just go to reports, and you just do, let me quickly do that for you here. So I'm just going to search, because we have 200 plus reports here. I'm just going to search for, all right, service install attempted, right? Service account installation, attempt to install a service. So this is what I am referring to. So when you have such reports in place, so I just go ahead and have a look at the report. So I just see whether I have any services installed in the last 24 hours. It looks like I have certain services. So I need to know what is the file name. If this is suspicious, pin it down immediately, all right? Now, what is the account name? From where what is the service getting started, and when was it started, so on and so forth. So when was the attempt made and all that stuff. This is something that I want. And if you need to add more information, just go to add or remove columns and add more information to the report that you see here. So service account installations 4697, please watch out. Now, the next thing, something related to service accounts again, is all of us have service accounts, right? And we have this wonderful service account that is meant to just take backups. Now, let's say the service account that you have in your infrastructure that is only supposed to take backups, scheduled backups, all of a sudden is trying to access your financial server through the UNC path. That's strange, all right? So when you have service accounts with predefined actions, then you'll have to watch out for 5140, which is accessing of UNC path. So none of your service accounts have no job in logging 5140. This is a strict no. Watch out for this, right? Get the list of all your service accounts in your infrastructure. You have a free tool even from Manage Engine. Just go to Google and then type Active Directory free tools Manage Engine. You get a free tool that will retrieve all the service accounts that you want, right? Now, after getting the list of service accounts, watch out for 5140. None of your service accounts should be recording this. If that's the case, it could be sign of lateral movement. All right, my last case here. I'm not going to spend much time on lateral movement, but I thought as you have too many cases, I'll just share at least 4. Now, one thing that I want you to watch out for is your service account. There are 9 types of logons, right? Log on, it's not always you typing in the username and password and then hitting enter. That's interactive logon, okay? Now, apart from interactive logon, you have 8 other types of logons, total 9. So your service accounts should not be performing an interactive logon at all, right? That's my point. So watch, again, when you have the list of service accounts, watch out for 4624 and logon type 2 or logon type 10. If you find this is true, then please raise an alert. Now, this is a possible sign of a service account. Now, if your service account is trying to do something suspicious, you need to know. That's all I'm saying. A very important question to all of you here. How many of you trust your antivirus? It would be great if you could just let me know a yes or a no using the chat window. Trusting your antivirus. Do we really trust the antivirus? Yes, if it is a good one, yes, but that yes is a partial yes, okay? So all I'm saying is you have an AV deployed in your infrastructure, but my question to you is you need to actually feed your antivirus logs to your SIEM solution, right? So let me tell you, why do I need to feed my AV logs to my SIEM solution? That's quite strange. I've not heard that before. No, you should be doing it. The goal here is not to detect an attack. The goal here is simply to detect stupidity from an attacker, right? Now, if I'm an attacker, I write a payload and I actually deploy that payload in your infrastructure through a phishing email or I have a phishing website. Your users, by mistake, download the file or click the attachment and the exe or the piece of code gets executed, right? And your antivirus actually catches it. I'm not saying your antivirus catches it most of the time. Your antivirus can catch it, has the possibility to do it sometimes, right? If you have a log feed or a log entry saying that there's a virus detected on a server, and you see that in your SIEM solution, now it doesn't matter whether you clean the virus or not. I want you to ask a very important question to the incident handling team. How did the virus get to the server? All right. Identify the reason why the virus appeared on a server. It doesn't matter if it's cleaned or not, right? So you'll have to, if you get answers for the first question here, you will be able to track back its source. You'll be able to know which application or which user actually triggered the process. That's why I want you to feed antivirus logs to your SIEM solution. right? So you have n number of antivirus and you can feed any log that you want. So if you just go to reporting section and you just go to threat detection from antivirus, you can feed in any logs from Kaspersky or Sophos or Norton or McAfee. So you should have a report in place that actually tells you that, hey, a virus is detected on a server. The first thing that I want you to do is escalate the incident and then ask the team, how did the virus land on the server? Because it could take you to a blacklisted IP or a blacklisted port, as simple as that. The beginning of an attack. Okay. Now, my last point or my last case is data exfiltration. Again, this is a very simple case. And the case is none of your servers, okay, the logs that I want you to watch out for is the firewall log. So if your servers are establishing connection to some public ports, right, it's a strict no-no. Now, why should my confidential server all of a sudden establish connection to a public port? If that's the case, I'll have to stop it. I'll have to know things immediately. The reasons could be some malicious web uploads is going on, so some corporate data is being uploaded, or let's say you have excessive email activity to other domains apart from yours to an external domain. Again, that could be a deviation too. So these are some of the cases that I wanted to share. These are some of the common IOCs that I wanted to share with you. So I understand that we have a lot of questions related to the event ID and the logs that you need to focus on. Do not worry, there'll be a recording of this session. So you can take note of it at your own pace if that's of interest to you. Now, let me quickly introduce you to Log 360. So over the due course of the session, you might have noticed that I opened up Event Log Analyzer, I opened up AD Audit and all that stuff. Now, where's the consolidation? Should we be toggling between multiple windows, or can we get all this in one single pane of glass? That's when Log 360 comes into picture, which is the SIEM offering from Manage Engine, and that focuses on all these log sources that you see here. To make it simple, Windows, non-Windows, and everything else. If you have a log, even that can even be a custom log too, right? From an application that is built by your organization. So if you have a log that's in human readable format, feed those logs to Log 360, and you get all sorts of insights that you want. I'm just keeping it very simple here. To give you the number of log sources that we focus on at least 700 log sources. You can pick any top vendor out there in the market. We have log sources of that vendor being processed by our processing engine. Right. Now, I'm quickly going to jump to the Log 360 console and show you the product itself without just being talking about, without just showing you the PPT. I'm just going to jump into the product. You see this is a login screen of Log 360. And you can see that Log 360 has 8 modules here, okay? AD Audit, Event Log, one for Office 365. Okay, this is AD Audit, and this is Event Log. Let me just go to multiple modules, and then I'll be able to show you in depth. So Event Log, that focuses on all sorts of logs that I was talking about. And if you are keen on auditing your Office 365 infrastructure, or even monitoring your Office 365 infrastructure, yes, you have it. Now, please excuse this license message. That's my demo setup, so please excuse me for that. So if it's Exchange, then you have your Exchange setup in place, right? So you simply log into the modules that you want, and if you're more focused on data loss prevention, DLP, then we have a Data Security Plus module for that too, okay? That can actually help you categorize files, stale files, or let's say frequently modified files and all that stuff. And if, let's say, 10,000 files get modified in less than a couple of seconds, which is a possible ransomware attack, you have an option to attach a workflow to that event and then handle it in real time, right? Now, all these are the modules, and if you focus on cloud, let's say Azure, AWS, we have Cloud Security Plus for that. Okay, that's the cloud auditing module. All these modules fall under a single umbrella called Log 360. You can pick and choose the modules that you want. You're just interested in the Windows module, yes, go ahead. Or you'd like to track your non-Windows as well, so to go ahead and do that. No, I have a dedicated Office 365 setup, and there are certain things that I cannot control in Office 365. Can I audit all those? Yes, we give you the options for that too, right? Now that's Log 360, an overview. Now, what are the things that Log 360 can do? Now, the tool can help you with incident management. Okay, this is very, very important. And incident management has three phases: detecting, resolving, and creating some sort of accountability for that incident. An incident here, I refer to a security incident, right? So anytime something gets logged in your logs, let me quickly show you an example here. So let's say I get an alert. That's an incident, right? So every time I get an alert, now the alert, the first stage is detecting an incident. That's something related to alert. So how would you detect an incident is, we have two important parts here. One is we have a threat intelligence platform. Let me make it simple. So basically what happens is when you feed a log to Log 360, Log 360 checks for the malicious presence of any IPs or any URLs in that log against the threat database, the global threat database that we have. And when your log, the one that you have just now given to Log 360, has one of those threat IPs, then we raise an alarm, okay? And we also correlate multiple events and we give it to you in real time. Of course, we do have built-in IOCs and indicator of attacks in the application. So it's all about the threat intelligence platform that we have, and on top of that we have a real-time correlation engine. So these two things together help us in the first stage, which is incident detection. Now after detecting the incident, how would you resolve the incident? If that's your question, all right, incident resolution, we have automated workflows. Okay, now I told you certain things are common, like a brute force attack pattern is common across the entire globe. And if you have something of that sort happening in your infrastructure and the logs capture it, you have an option to attach that task or that security incident to a workflow here. Okay, so when you enable a workflow, you can then decide what are the tasks that you want to achieve. So say for instance, a computer is under DDoS attack. Okay, so when you receive volumes of information to that specific entity in your infrastructure, and if you want that computer to be taken out of the network so that you clear up that clear up the mess, and then you then bring it back to production, you can very well attach a workflow to the incident that's been raised. So that's incident resolution with automated workflows. Now, how do you create some sort of accountability? Well, accountability can only be there in place when you actually have a ticketing system. So let me quickly show you this here. So let's say I have an alert. Now these alerts can be mapped to a technician of your choice. You want this to be mapped to an admin when it's let's say when it's a brute force, or when it's a SQL injection, or when it's any kind of attack that you think should be dealt by the admin. You just go ahead and assign it, and as and when the case is the case status changes, you can very well track them by the various stages that we have here. So the case goes from open to in progress to close, and if the issue appears again, you just reopen the case and then work on it again. So this is how you create some sort of accountability, and you also get to know about the status of the case right from the alerting section itself. So this is what I was referring to as creating accountability. So again, a quick recap: incident detection through threat intelligence and real-time correlation and alerting, incident resolution through automated workflows, creating accountability through the ticketing system that I just showed you. All right. Now, if you had joined my session yesterday, I told you that we have something called UBA. Okay, we have leveraged machine learning to our logs. So machine learning basically looks for time, count, and pattern. So if it's an irregular time, I'm sorry, if it's an unusual time or unusual count and unusual pattern that is seen in the logs, yes, we flag it. So that's UBA, and we were discussing yesterday only about Windows. Now, when you talk about machine learning for other logs in infrastructure, that's when a new flavor arises, and that flavor is user and entity behavior analysis here, okay, analytics. So user and entity, we focus on two different components here. I'm just going to give you an example. I told you that we focus on three things: time, count, and pattern. So for time, let's say a user logging into a system at 11 o'clock in the night. Now, so far in the last 3 years, the user has never touched the system after 8 p.m. All of a sudden, on a Saturday night at 11, the user has initiated a VPN connection to one of the servers. That's unusual time, right? So we flag that. And one of your file servers is getting let's say modification events, or is logging file modification events, 10,000 events in less than 90 seconds. That means that entity is getting huge number of requests, which has not been the case in the past. So all this is recorded by leveraging ML into the application, into the log management process that we have. And again, you need not be updating the thresholds manually. So let's say a user modifying 10 files a day, first time is flagged, and if it's regular for that user account, then the threshold would be automatically updated. So next time the same user modifies 10 files on day 2, you will not be getting notified, okay? So the threshold is automatically updated. This is what I call dynamic when you have UEBA in picture. And the third thing that we look out for is pattern. Okay, for pattern, let me tell you something, an example here. A user uploading a file, unusually from a specific server. It could be corporate data. Okay, he or she is trying to copy an important file, and then they're trying to upload it to Dropbox. Okay, an unusual upload from a specific server. This is a deviation in pattern. So all such deviations in pattern are also recorded by the application. And we arrive at something called a risk score. This is the best part, right? So we, from raw logs to reporting, from reporting to alerting and indicators of compromise and all that, move to risk score of a user, right? And the risk score would look something like this. So if I just go to log360 here, and I open up log360 UEBA, so we have risk scores for every user. Let me quickly close this. You see this? We have risk scores for every user. And if you drill down the risk score for the user, this is again a screenshot. So I see that Johnson is a user with high risk score. So 89, 85, 90, and Johnson's score is 91. So I click on Johnson's account and I get the current risk score, the peak risk score, insider threat, data exfiltration score, and I see that I have a summary of the actions done by the user, which I can drill down and find out what events have actually attributed to the score of 91 for this specific user, right? So I get an option to drill down and understand what exactly has this user performed to attain a high risk score, right? The application that I was talking about so long was Log360, which again has multiple modules in place. Now, we're almost nearing the end of the presentation here. I'll wrap up the presentation with just two things. Common information security mistakes. This is, when I say it's common across 90% of the organization. I don't have stats with me, but I'm 100% sure this is common across 90% of the organizations. I either find that the installation that you have is capturing everything or not capturing anything at all, right? So it's either too noisy or too quiet. So you have to manually define your auditing priorities. You'll have to decide what to audit and what not to audit. You'll have to have some sort of excluding policies too to reduce noise. Now, never, never, never allow your log management tool to run in autopilot mode, right? Don't install the application today and then let it run on its own and then just generate reports whenever you have an audit. Please don't do that, okay? Please have the habit of revisiting your auditing principles once in every 30 days and see whether you can add new entries to your tool or remove any outdated entries. Now, people are under the notion that it's always the expensive products that do the job for you. It's not always the case, I'm sorry to say, and I've seen this in real time, in reality. So, when you evaluate an application, please check whether the application, covers at least 80% of your SIEM goals. If that's the case, then that is the right application for you, okay, irrespective of the cost. It can be a high cost application or a low cost application. If that meets 80% of your requirement, please go for it. Start evaluating the product, right? Now, I want you to ask a few questions to your vendor, and the questions are, is the vendor or is the application that is marketed by the vendor supporting or is going to support agent-based or agentless log collection or both models, okay? Because there are certain cases in which we need to deploy agents to collect logs too. So you need to first understand that from your vendor. And how fast is your log processing engine? Are we able to process 15,000 logs per second, 20,000 logs per second from various log sources? And how fast can the searches be? When you actually store volumes of data, how fast and elastic can the search get? And can it look at all the components that I want? Okay. And alerts. Do I have the capability to set alerts on anything and everything that I feel is important? I'm not saying you receiving 100 emails a day is a good thing. All I'm saying is receiving meaningful alerts. If you set thresholds, if you set alerts with proper thresholds, you will not be getting too many emails. But even if you get one email, that is going to be a high priority email from your SIEM solution. So you should be able to set alerts on anything that you want, and meaningful alerts. Last but not the least, how are you storing logs? Is it encrypted? Is it hashed? Is it timestamped? Because your logs should be tamper proof, right? So these are the things that I wanted to discuss with you. And with that said, I'm going to quickly end this session. But before ending the session, once again, I'd like to thank you for your participation for all these 3 days. Now, I just would request you to watch out your screen for 4 basic questions that I'm going to trigger. So if you could spend, let's say, a couple of seconds for that, I'd be more than happy to end this session, right? So the poll is just to understand whether you are using the product or you're not using the product, and something related to that, okay? Okay, we have fair answers for this. I'm closing this one. So my question number 2 out of 4, here we go. I've launched the second question for you. All right. So thank you very much. Thank you very much. I see the vote percentage here, and thank you very much for staying active till the end. It means a lot. Closing question number 2, launching number 3. Here you go. All right, we have one more to go, so please stay with me for the next 10 seconds. This would help us serve you better. That's the whole point of this here, right? And this question specifically, is targeted to know whether you have got in touch with a tech team in order to understand the capabilities, okay? That's it. So my last question for you is, if you feel that the things that you saw right now is kind of useful, and if you have not used the application so far, would you be interested in trying it out? Okay. The answer can be yes, the answer can be no, or if you have, let's say, another tool already, that's fine. I'd be more than happy if you could use some of the cases that we discussed so far, right? All right. So day one, day two, day three, thank you so very much for your participation. It means a lot to us. If you have any questions, please, please, please feel free to trouble me anytime. I would love answering your questions. I already see that we have a bunch of questions to which I'll get back to you via emails. Thank you very much for your participation here. I'm sorry. You've been a wonderful audience. Have a wonderful evening. Bye bye.